Welcome to Trigger Talk, your place for everything first-person shooters, Battlefield, Call of Duty, and so much more. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic. You guys just missed me combining three of my podcast's intros, the Battlefield show, Trigger Talk, and Star Wars Uplink, and it was just as horrible as you can imagine right now.
Me and Sage we're deep in adulthood at the moment over the last few weeks, and I think it's scrambled our brains a little bit. We're just not we're not quite all there at the moment.
Yeah, we're doing things that aren't video games right now, and our brains are made only for video games, so it's just not a good mix right now. Yeah, but talking about video games, we have quite the big topic it's been rumored and leaked, and I'm using quotation marks with all those things because now we have the official details on what the future for Xbox looks like, and we're going to be talking about how that will impact Call of Duty and so much more as we enter Duty Calls. So let's jump in. So we initially, with this podcast, we came into this idea with having segments. And when we talk about specific topics, they're in our brains as specific segments and sections. We talk about Call of Duty, it's Duty Calls. And today, we've got quite a bit of interesting news when it comes to the game industry as a whole. Last week, maybe this week, we had some interesting topics when it comes to almost the erasure of exclusives. And it started surprisingly with this rumor, and then next up, it was more official when it came to PlayStation, because PlayStation is... they had their big investors meeting, and they're talking about the future of PlayStation. They're now in the latter half of the PlayStation's life cycle, and it's going to look different than it has up to this point when you look at a console generation. And the CEO of Sony said, hey, as we enter this new stage of PlayStation, we're going to look at ways that we can diversify and reach new audiences by taking our existing games and putting them on other platforms. And they didn't say what kind of platforms. When they say that, we all assume not Xbox, but PC. And that's exemplified by the examples of Last of Us coming to PC and the other games like, I think the first God of War is on Steam. Yeah. And I think the Horizon games are on Steam, or at least the first one is.
Yeah, I think Forbidden West, which is the second one, is on the way, but I'm not sure. And then I think Ragnarok, as in God of War Ragnarok, I want to say that launched late last year as well on there. It's pretty much a year after the actual launch, which is like November 2022. So yeah, I'm pretty sure all of them, except for Horizon, they're all out now. And then there was even last week, it might be 2 weeks ago now, Helldivers 2. That came out. That actually launched day one.
I think that was the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, which is I don't think they've ever really. I could be wrong, but I don't think they've ever really done that. And that was
I think that was the
success.
First time they've done it.
Yeah, so it's clear that they looked at that and went, "Oh, wow! Like, why have we not been doing that already?" So it seems a lot of these. I don't think all games now or anything will be like day and date on PC. I think they'll still be like a year exclusive on PlayStation, and then they'll come a year later. But maybe with like the more multiplayer, like live service type of games, I think they could potentially launch them day one because of the success of Helldivers.
That's where it makes the most sense, honestly, to me, is the online games. So this is where it all started, was this discussion around the video game industry reaching a maturation point. They have now reached a level where game makers and game platforms are looking for ways that they can diversify and reach new audiences, and are putting less of a focus on the specific hardware than they are on the games. As we saw from the leaked documents around Sony, their games are very expensive, and even at the scale that they release, sometimes it doesn't quite work, which is why there's this big focus on live service games and blah, 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 blah. But you need those tentpole games. The reason I bought a PlayStation was so I could buy the PlayStation exclusive story games, because that's what I go to PlayStation for. Even though I personally prefer the experience over on Xbox, I still got the PS5 so I could play those games. And I think we're going to see less and less of a need for that. And Phil Spencer said in this interview that says in the next 5 to 10 years, he sees a world where there's less of a focus on this idea of platform exclusivity, and you're going to be competing for how easily and enjoyable you can make that gaming experience on your specific console or hardware. And they're more focused on letting users and gamers play where they want, when they want, and how they want than they are on the hardware itself, but they still will continue to invest into that hardware. As we got in this interview, they're already teasing the next generation and saying that it will be the biggest technological leap in the history of video games.
It's definitely exciting, that part there. That has me very keen for it. It's weird because it feels like this generation kind of just started, and realistically it did. It's only like 3.5 years ago that or less than that actually, that the Series X and the PS5 came out.
Yeah.
But it does feel like we're just beginning, and now they're already sort of talking about, and even in that earnings call the other day, they said at Sony that they're entering the latter stages of the PS5's life cycle. So they both kind of touched on next gen being on the horizon. It's still, I would say, 3 to 4 years away, but yeah, it's very exciting that, I don't know, it just always gets me excited, a new generation, even though it's probably in a way oversold by them, both companies. They kind of hype
because if
it
you
up.
look at the experience, specifically on Xbox, they're going from Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X to Series X and Series S. It's the same UI. It feels exactly the same, but the box looks different.
Yeah, exactly. And it is not that much of a... I think it's not as much of a leap as we think it is. This is when you think of those other versions, like you said, like the One X, for example. When you compare an Xbox One to a Series X, that's a big gap. But when you compare the most recent model of the Xbox One compared to the Series S, for example, they're not actually that much different. Obviously, the Series S is more powerful, but it's not like a drastic, crazy amount. And it's the same with the PlayStation. Like the PS4 Pro is still pretty damn good compared to the PS5. The PS5 is obviously more powerful, but yeah, I think the companies kind of hype it up more than it actually is. But I fully buy into that. Like I just cannot wait for each new generation, and so it's definitely exciting news on that front that they're sounding confident that this will be the biggest leap. And I already thought the previous leap was pretty damn big. So
yes,
I'm very keen to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I love console generation launches. It's so exciting, and while I think we're seeing a very different time frame, because we were talking about this before we recorded, the introduction of the Switch has changed how people think of video games. Now you almost have an expectation for games to be able to be played on the go. I have the Steam Deck, and it has changed how I play video games. Now, if there's a game like, I'm playing Cyberpunk right now, if there's a game like Cyberpunk where I know it's going to run well, I'll just play it on my Steam Deck, and then I'll wait to play the bigger games like The Last of Us Part 2s on the big screen with my PlayStation. Or if there's like an online game, more than likely I'll be playing that on the Xbox. Or if I know a game is optimized well, like I've been playing Dead Space, getting through that game is absolutely gorgeous on the Xbox with that little bit of extra power that the Xbox Series X has over the PS5. Super smooth, even in performance mode. I'm getting like incredible textures and incredible frame rates. Like that's the kind of experience that we're getting now. And I think as we get into a deeper competition, games are going to get better because you now have to fight on the gameplay side of things or the game experience side of things. And when there's competition, we all as players or consumers or customers or what have you, it's going to get better.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing that I'm excited about from the update today is that a lot of people were melting down last week about, oh, they're not going to make consoles anymore, and this is not only bad for Xbox players because we won't have a next-gen console, but Sony's got no competition, and now Sony's going to drop off, and it's all just like people were just freaking out, and in reality, nothing has changed on that front. And it's a good. I kind of always in this situation root for the underdog in that I don't care about the console wars. I should say I just don't care. I like games. I don't care what platform I'm playing my games on. I'm not buying an
Xbox so I can look at it in my living room. I'm buying it to play games. Yeah, exactly. I'm not like that. It doesn't matter what box it is. It matters about the games.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly. And that's how I've kind of always been. And I would say that like I'm more an Xbox guy purely based on the fact that that's just what I had as a kid. But that doesn't make me like an Xbox
and also
fan
they
and a PlayStation
actually
hater.
Treat you like people.
Yeah. And that's the thing here that I was just going to get to, that I'm sort of rooting for Xbox now. Not to say that I'm hating on PlayStation. I've literally played my PlayStation way more than my Xbox, and a lot of the games they're putting out I'm absolutely loving. But I'm almost feeling as though I am like Team Xbox in just the sense that I do want them to compete and push Sony.
Mm-hmm. I don't have to buy a $10 upgrade so I can play my Xbox 360 game on my Xbox One game on my Xbox Series X.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just think that the way that they do things, where they are definitely a bit more consumer friendly, I'm just a big fan of that. And I think Sony does their way. I don't necessarily agree with like the I'm not a fan of exclusives personally. I just think that like I want PlayStation players to be able to play Starfield. You know, I don't care. I'm not like, no, you can't have that game. I don't care. I don't care who's playing a game. Like, I can play it and they can play it. Could not care less. But in that, like, with that being said, I do understand why exclusives are a thing. They need people to buy the console, and that worked for both you and me. You just said the same thing, that you bought a PlayStation because you wanted to play God of War and those games, and it works. Like, I bought a PlayStation to play those games as well. So I do like what Sony's doing on that front. I think that they nail like those games that they make, the really cinematic, like the highest quality games that really have ever been made. When you look at games like Ragnarok and The Last of Us 2 and stuff like that, I love that side of Sony. And then on the flip side, I love the more consumer friendly side of Xbox, where they're kind of just making fun games, and they're probably all not as high quality as the PlayStation ones, but not every game has to be that. I don't need every game to be like I'm playing a real life, like a movie. Like, that's not how gaming is. Some of my favorite experiences, I was just talking to you before we started recording, Prince of Persia. That's a platformer. It's like a 2D it's like an old school game, and I had a blast with it. And I don't need every game to be that super high end, exclusive game. So I think they're both doing things well, and I do just think that the way that Xbox handles their stuff in terms of, they've even said, we don't really care if you buy the console. Like, we just don't care. We just want people to play. We just want you to buy Game Pass and be able to play the games wherever you want. I'm a big fan of that, and I'm looking forward to it. They did mention today that they're talking about something related to hardware in the holiday period. So I imagine come the end of the year, they'll announce. There's been rumors of the handheld. There's been rumors of like the Xbox Series X Pro or whatever it'll be, like the next
the Series X S.
I won't lie, man. I really need them in the next generation to just name it like the Xbox 3 or something. Like, just call it something. I'm really sick of calling it the Series X. It's just too much. Too many words. Just call it the Xbox. Just call it Xbox 2. They called the last one the Xbox One. Let's just go with that. Xbox 2, Xbox 3, Xbox 4. Because it's too many freaking. When they do release some sort of pro version, there'll be the Series X, the Series S, and the Series like whatever the next one is, and it's just too much.
This Xbox Series Y. Yeah. On top of all these things, they also said something interesting, which is It's been rumored. Obviously, we've heard about this. We kind of had an inkling that they would spend about $69 billion on Activision, and more than likely we will see them on probably Game Pass, and we do have confirmation of that we are going to see Activision games on Game Pass in some form or fashion. It's kicking off with
Diablo
which
4.
one was it? Yes, Diablo 4. And that's like the first big one that's going to be added to Game Pass. And I assume we're eventually going to get a situation where Call of Duty is on Game Pass. That's what we're going to be talking about. What are your thoughts on this? First question, do you think it will actually go to Game Pass?
I do. I think that is going, like, it seems as though that is their new strategy, and it has been over the last probably year or two now, that all of these big, essentially all the first party games, all the games that they own, the companies who are making them, they all launch on Game Pass. They've said the same, like Starfield did, they said the same for Indiana Jones, which is going to be a huge game, and they could sell that and I would buy it, but they've said it's going to Game Pass, so I don't have to buy it anymore. It's just going to be free day one.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a different beast with Call of Duty because it's obviously so big. That being said, when you look at the entire gaming industry, Xbox is probably, if I looked at the Call of Duty player base, and for example, let's just make the number 100 million, because I know during like Warzone, peak Warzone anyway, there was 100 million players.
Yeah.
It's obviously not at that level anymore, but let's just say that, for example. I would have to guess that Xbox would be around the 30% roughly, because that's just based on metrics from other games. And that is a bit older too, to be fair. But like,
yeah,
I remember back in the Battlefront days, it was roughly, I think, 60% PlayStation, 30% Xbox, and roughly 10% PC. I do think the PC player base in just gaming in general has grown a lot. So it's probably more 50% PlayStation, 25% Xbox, and the rest would be PC now. But it's not that bit. Like, they're still going to be selling the game on PlayStation, and well, I guess not PC, but yeah, if PlayStation's still 60% or 50% of the player base, which is still 50 million people, then that's a lot of sales they can still make while still pleasing the Xbox crowd that, hey, you guys get it. Like, that's their version of an exclusive, where all those other PlayStation guys, they got to pay $100 for the game. We get it for free. That's your bonus for being on Xbox or on PC, because it's obviously, there's the PC Game Pass as well. So yeah, I think it will happen. It's also just kind of baffling that it can. I don't fully understand how Game Pass is even sustainable, to be honest. I don't actually know how they can afford to run it, because they would have to.
Microsoft.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they're worth $3 trillion. So like, they can afford it, obviously, but it's just the they have to be losing money on it, don't they? I just don't understand how they can offer something like, it's such a good deal. It's actually a mind-blowingly good deal that it feels like you're ripping them off or something. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
It depends on how they have it structured on the back. And I don't think they're losing money, or if they are losing money, I don't think it's as much as we maybe think.
Yeah.
Because they may have specific things of like, we'll bring... Obviously, the big games, they'll probably have some money tied around getting them on the platform. There's got to be some deals on that. But maybe as like an indie, you get like almost a YouTube type payout. Like if you're an indie and you say check the box to be on Game Pass, maybe every time your game gets downloaded, you get like the Spotify 0.001% or something like that. So there's multiple ways that they could do something like that. But I do think that the most powerful thing that Microsoft has over any of the other people is Game Pass. Because if you get Game Pass Ultimate, you get the PC and you get the console, you get everything super easy. You get cloud streaming. Like, I could pull up my phone right now. I could play. Yeah. I could control my Xbox from the house right now, and I've done that before, and it works pretty great. Just because Microsoft also has Azure and the cloud infrastructure that like 20 to 30% of the internet runs off of. Like, there's a lot there that Xbox has over a lot of the other studios and like publishers and game platforms that the other ones don't have.
Mm-hmm. The other thing they have that they don't have is unlimited money. Like,
they don't have like another offshoot that is specifically fine with losing money in this division.
I looked into it just after the call because I was just curious. I looked up the Sony net worth, and I think it's $113 billion, which is still a huge company, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I did the maths, and I believe that is 0.013 the size of Microsoft. Like, just for context of how big that company is, because no one thinks of Sony as like this small indie company. Like, it's a huge like a huge corporation. But that just goes to show that I think Microsoft could, if they just wanted to, be like, well, we're just going to sink. We're going to take an immediate loss and just sink billions of dollars into this and just kill off the other ones. And then we have a monopoly on the gaming industry. So that's the other thing, which I don't think they'll ever necessarily do. And it's harder. I don't care how much money they sink into it. There's still so many people that will just stay loyal to PlayStation and stuff. But that's
and then there's also the added oversight when it comes to acquisitions that is now available since the last acquisition that Microsoft did of Activision Blizzard King. They won't be able to do something like that ever again. I would be surprised, honestly, if they ever acquired another studio, period.
I know, I think I think Nintendo and Sony would have to do their own big acquisitions to like allow Microsoft to do that, if that makes sense. Like, that would then say to the FTC that, it's maybe not as much of a monopoly now because like these other companies are also growing, so the whole industry is growing, so therefore we can do it. But I just don't think they'll obviously buy other studios, but like small. Like, I don't see them ever buying. People were talking about them buying EA, and like, no chance. There's no chance that they'll be allowed to do that
ever.
So, nah. So but I think in terms of like to link what I was talking about with the money, I think even if Game Pass was operating at a loss, I just don't even think they need to worry about that because it's such a big company that eventually they can turn that into a profit. It might be an immediate loss, but they can eventually turn that around by getting people in there and getting people into their platform, which can then sort of turn the tide. So it's a very interesting strategy that they have compared to like Sony is still a little bit, it's like almost a bit archaic in the way that they do it. Not that that's a bad thing, but just like, here's our console and we have a bunch of games that you can only get on this console, and that is the selling point. There is no other, for me, alternative or reason to get a PlayStation personally. The Xbox console, I personally think, is better, not by a drastic amount, but it's just like statistically it is slightly more powerful. There's Game Pass. I personally prefer the controller. That's just a personal thing, though. But like, the only thing PlayStation offers for me is the exclusives, whereas Xbox is doing a lot of different stuff, like you said, with the cloud and all that. Like, they've just got a lot of different angles here, and it's interesting to watch these two big companies going at it in very different ways, and even the same with Nintendo. They're just doing their own thing too. They don't even care. To them, they're just like, who's PlayStation and Microsoft? We don't care about them.
Who are those guys? What? There's. I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're right with the idea that they are going to bring Call of Duty to Game Pass. I don't think it's going to be. I honestly think they may wait a year before we see. Like, I don't think we will see the next Call of Duty on Game Pass, or there might be a delay because I feel like they're going to want to get some of the money back from that big acquisition. And the way to do that is to release a Call of Duty, which brings X amount of money. And I think it'll bring even more money because this will be the first time a Call of Duty game will have been released post acquisition. from Xbox.
Yeah, I'm not sure on it. I could see them doing that just because, like you said, it's the first one, and I think like we're in that kind of transition period of we're not really sure what's going on with the day one Game Pass stuff yet. But I also think that they've even just said in today's thing that first party games will come to Game Pass day one, and now
that
technically
is true.
Call of Duty is a first party game, and because if it was just like only Xbox that it was on, then I wouldn't be sure. But because of the fact they'll still sell so many copies on PlayStation, I think they can kind of have their cake and eat it too, in the fact that they get it on Game Pass and all the people on Game Pass will enjoy that, but they'll also probably get a lot more people subscribing. But then they're going to sell it anyway. They're still going to sell
and some games, like I'll get it on Game Pass, but I'm like, I'll want to play this later, and in case it ever gets taken off, I'll still have it, and then I'll just buy it. Or,
I mean,
like,
look at Starfield too. That sold drastically well, and it was on Game Pass. I bought it. I bought the early access to get it like 3 days earlier. I could have got it free, but I was like, no, I want to play it now. I'm just going to pay $50 to get it now. So
the super smart thing that they did is with Starfield, you got the base game for free with your subscription of Game Pass, and also you got the opportunity to buy the like $20 upgrade to get the Ultimate Edition. So you just bought something with a free game, kind of.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with COD too, is that it is so microtransaction heavy as well that they'll obviously, like, it's one of those things where you look at all the other free-to-play shooters, the more people they do get in the door, that still means more money that they'll sell through, they'll sell items in the store. So I think this year's COD, I think that'll be their big thing for this year, is that they're going to come out and say, yep, this Call of Duty is launching on Game Pass. I do think it'll happen, but I also won't, like what you said, I wouldn't be shocked either if they didn't, just because we're in that weird period where we don't really know. And I thought they could have maybe announced that today, because they announced Diablo. I thought that would be a really cool, because a lot of people were like stressing about Microsoft and Xbox this week, saying like, oh my God, they're like going under.
They're never going to make another console ever again.
Yeah. So that would have been a cool like fight back almost from them to be like, no, everything's fine. And also, by the way, Call of Duty's launching on Game Pass. That would have been a really cool thing to do. But I think they will. I think they'll do it. And I think it's this. Yeah, I think it's the smart thing to do. I think if they want to grow Game Pass and they want to give people a reason to get Xbox, if someone doesn't have a console, right? Let's just say someone still is in the previous gen, they haven't been able to save up and buy next gen console, right? And you're looking at the Series X and the PS5, and it's like September, October of this year, and you're a huge Call of Duty fan and you want to get the next gen console to play the game in next gen, what console are you going to buy? Because I know there's a lot of great exclusives on PlayStation, but for me, if they said you can buy our console and you can get Call of Duty, which that might be that person's favorite game, free on day one with Game Pass, I'm buying an Xbox. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really big selling point that they can. It almost feels like, why wait until next year? You know what I mean? Like, the only reason I can think of that is that, the acquisition's only just gone through in the last like 6 or so months. So maybe there was like legal, maybe that the game that's currently being worked on had something in the contract for it or whatever that said it can't come to Game Pass,
or the deal with Sony that says, hey, you can't put this on, we won't put this on Game Pass for a year, so it gives you guys time to prepare. Who knows? Yeah,
because there was all the stuff with the acquisition and the FTC and all that Sony thought, like, Sony was kind of going against it, saying it's like a monopoly in that, and they they were forced to come out and say, no, the game isn't going to be exclusive, it's still coming out on PlayStation. So yeah, maybe there was some sort of deal struck there to make the acquisition go through, where they said, we promise we won't launch it on Game Pass.
They said it'll come to all future Call of Duty games will come to PlayStation for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting it's very interesting that they said 10 years, not just forever. Because imagine that. Imagine if Sony decides to play the exclusive game and just stick with it and go, nah, we're not giving you these games. And then one day Microsoft just goes, well, okay, if you want to play that game, you're not having Call of Duty. Sorry, the biggest game every year, you're not having it. Like that would be, which I don't think they would, because it makes them so much more money selling it on PlayStation. But
look at what they did with Minecraft. They have it on everything. You can play that game on a toaster. If you buy it for your fridge, Xbox gets money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I am all for not having exclusives as well. Not just for the players, but like as if that doesn't make more money. If you can make a game, it costs X amount of money to make a game, right? And you can either sell it to one handful of people or two handfuls of people. Which one are you going to do? To me, it's like I'm obviously going to sell it to more people. Like I don't really understand it. I do get that that's what helps sell the console and the platform and the ecosystem in general, but like we've seen that consoles actually operate at a loss. Like they actually don't even make money on the actual consoles themselves. So I just think that is a bit of a way of the past that they, I don't know. It's an interesting time ahead is the way that I'm looking at this, because these acquisitions are now Game Pass, that it's ramping up. The fact we're getting like Indiana Jones and all that on day one, it's just ridiculous. It's very it's very interesting to see or to think about what's going to happen in the next few years. And like Phil said, he sees a world where exclusives aren't really that big of a thing. I don't know how true that will be. I still think like the next God of War game, I'm dropping everything when that comes out. I'm not going to ever stop playing those exclusives. So I don't know how true that is that he thinks that. But at the same time, in terms of a business sense, I think that makes sense, that realistically there's only like one exclusive per year that's like a big, huge blockbuster. We got Spider-Man and God of War and The Last of Us. They're really like the top tier exclusives that it's only one game per year. Every other game is still making money. So it's probably not as big of a deal as we actually think when you look at it that way, in terms of like the business perspective anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the future of this looks like and how things will be moving forward as we get closer to the releases of these big games. And as we near the next Call of Duty game, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Yeah,
it's going to be one of the first COD launches that I'm actually like interested in. Not even for the game, just for what happens around it. Like I'm kind of done a bit with Call of Duty now that there's like these smaller games coming out that we've talked about in the previous episodes, and I'm still more keen on, the next Battlefield and stuff. So I'm kind of not that interested in COD at the moment, but in terms of that side of it, oh man, I'm so keen to see how that all goes down. It's just going to be it's going to be very interesting. That's such a power move for them to be able to say like, hey, this biggest game. I'd have to say it'd have to be the biggest game of all time, wouldn't it? When you look at how many sales every year, it's the highest selling game for like the last decade, pretty much yearly. It's got to be like the most bought game ever. Maybe like the Pokemon franchise, but even then they're like dying off. Not in terms of sales, but like they're not that good recently. Then you could say the same about COD. But anyway, whether it is the number one or what, it's such a huge franchise for them to just come out and be like, this is free day one to you guys. Like that's just going to be, I cannot wait for that announcement. Like it's going to be such an exciting day. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting year ahead. They mentioned the June showcase. They said they've got other games to show off as well that we haven't heard of yet. So yeah, it's a big year for Xbox, and I think it's needed, because obviously Sony has just dominated the market for a decade at this point, and I just think the competition's good. I like I said, I don't pledge my allegiance to one or the other. I just want good games at the end of the day. I don't really care what I play it on, but competition's good. And I do want Xbox to like lift the whole industry up in that sense, that if they're competing, all the other companies are going to have to compete, because they're going to look at a company that big in Microsoft and think, damn, we need to compete now, because if they get ahead of us with how much money they've got, like there's probably, I don't think anyone can ever catch back up to them if they were to like, if they made a gap as big as PlayStation has at the moment, for example, if it flipped the other way, I don't think Sony ever comes back from that, in terms of, not to say they would like, the company would die, but I just mean, I don't think they could ever make that ground up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the competition's good, and I'm all for it. Competition is what we need in the industry, especially with all the layoffs and that. Like, we need the gaming industry to be a bit more stable, I think.
Yeah, it is definitely true. And Phil Spencer said as much, that for the gaming industry to reach like the tech industry, there needs to be more growth, and there needs to be some changes in the realm of gaming right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting few years, that's for sure.
Yeah. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think Call of Duty will come to Game Pass? And if so, what ways do you think it will? Let us know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact@uplink.podcast.com. If you want to send an email, check out Sammy Boy's YouTube channels if you're into gaming, which I believe you would be, and Star Wars. And if you want some more Star Wars content in terms of a podcast, you can check out our podcast, Star Wars Uplink. As always, we'll see you later, video gamers.